The moment the world froze. I never imagined I'd say this publicly. It wasn't a state funeral. It wasn't a royal birth. It wasn't even a scandal in the tabloids. And yet, on this quiet afternoon, the entire world stopped. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Not because a king had spoken, not because a war had broken out, but because Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, second son of Princess Diana, royal rebel, husband, father, stepped before a microphone with eyes swollen red and a voice barely above a whisper. And then he said it. I never imagined I'd say this publicly, but one of my children is not biologically mine. Silence. A choking silence that wrapped around the globe like a noose. What did he just say? Did he just? Yes, he did. And it wasn't just the words. It was the weight behind them. The tremble in his voice. The pain etched across his face. The hesitation between each syllable, like he was dragging a sword out of his own chest with every word. But how did we get here? How did Prince Harry, a man who left the royal family in part to protect his wife and children, end up revealing a truth so intimate, so raw, so devastating? Let's rewind. Because this story doesn't start at that microphone. It doesn't start with a press release. And it certainly doesn't start with sympathy. No. It starts with whispers, doubts, glances exchanged behind closed doors. It starts with a slow, creeping suspicion, a thought too ugly to say out loud. Have you ever looked into the eyes of your child and felt something off? A disconnect you can't explain? Now imagine being a prince, a father, a man who walked away from a kingdom to raise his children in peace. And then one day, just one ordinary day, you open an envelope that makes your entire world crumble. That's where Prince Harry found himself. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because the truth, the real truth, was far more tangled than a single DNA result. This wasn't just a case of mistaken paternity. This was something darker, something deeper, something that, once revealed, could rattle the very foundation of monarchy and media alike. And Harry? He was just the first domino to fall. It began, as most modern tragedies do, with a moment that felt too small to matter. A glance, a pause, a flicker of discomfort behind a forced smile. Royal watchers, those obsessive fans who can detect a change in hairstyle from a single blurry photo, started to notice something strange. Not in Meghan, not in Harry, but in the children. Or rather, the way Harry interacted with them. He held one child more, smiled longer, spoke softer. With the other, there was a distance, barely perceptible, a stiffness, a lingering hesitation that no amount of fatherly charm could mask. But of course, no one said anything. Who would dare? Who could dare? You don't question the paternity of a prince's child. Until someone did. The first murmurs didn't come from Britain. They came from abroad. A gossip column buried in a Spanish tabloid, citing anonymous Montecito sources, made a shocking claim. That Prince Harry had taken a secret paternity test, and that the results were being kept under lock and key. The article was laughed off at first. Tabloid trash, people said. Clickbait. A smear campaign. But the damage had already been done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew. Even the British tabloids, once allies, once enemies, now curious vultures circling overhead, couldn't resist. Questions began to emerge, not just about the children, but about the timeline. When exactly were the children conceived? Where was Meghan during certain critical months? Why had their public appearances been so heavily curated, so controlled? Why were there so few unfiltered moments with the kids? And then a pause. A strange silence from the Sussex camp. No denial. No outrage. Just nothing. And that's when people really started to wonder, what are they hiding? Inside the walls of the Montecito mansion, the air was thick. Not with fear. Not yet. But with something worse, uncertainty. Harry had always been the emotional one. The raw one. The one willing to confront pain head-on. But this was different. This wasn't grief. This wasn't royal betrayal. This wasn't trauma from his mother's death or his feud with William. This was something primal. He would later admit, quietly, in a private phone call to a friend, that the moment he suspected something, he didn't want to be right. Not because of what it meant about Meghan, but because of what it meant about him. Because what kind of father doubts his own child? And yet, the doubt grew. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He would stare at the photographs. Hundreds of them. taken of him and the children. Looking, searching, hoping to find a resemblance. The connection, the proof that his heart was lying to him. And then one night, he made the call. A private doctor. Discreet. No lab names. No records. DNA samples collected quietly during a routine checkup. 2 swabs. 2 little bundles of cotton. He'd waited a week. 7 days of pretending nothing was wrong. 7 days of trying to love both children equally, desperately, fervently. 7 days of hiding his tears in the shower. And then, the results came. 2 envelopes. 2 lines. 2 answers. 1 child, confirmed. No question. DNA match with 99.999% certainty. The other? No match. Not even close. We need to stop here. Because this is where most people imagine the screaming starts. The accusations. The broken glasses. The shattered trust. But that's not what happened. There was no yelling. No slamming of doors. There was just silence. Harry read the page. Once. Twice. A third time. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat. Staring. Frozen. He would later say, "It was the most alone I've ever felt in my life. Not because I lost someone, but because I didn't know who I was anymore." Do you understand the weight of that? This wasn't just a personal loss. This was an identity crisis. For a man who had spent years carving out his role in the world, husband, father, protector, this discovery didn't just call his family into question. It called him into question, because if he wasn't that child's father, then what was he? The world, of course, didn't know any of this. Not yet. At that point, the press only knew that something was wrong. Harry and Meghan had canceled 2 appearances. Meghan had gone silent on social media. Harry had flown, without Meghan or the children, to London for private matters. The rumor mill exploded. Was it divorce? Was it health? Was it a royal deal? And then came the leak. A single line in a TMZ report. Sources close to the family claim that Prince Harry recently received shocking personal news that may alter his family dynamic. No further explanation. But that was all it took. Within hours, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Harry's truth. Hashtag royal scandal. Hashtag DN agate. And still, Harry remained silent. Until now. And so here we are. A microphone. A statement. A prince who never wanted to be royal again, suddenly standing in front of the world. He takes a breath. He looks down. He looks up. And then he says the line that makes history. "I never imagined I'd say this publicly, but one of my children is not biologically mine." What follows is a silence so deep, you can almost hear the monarchy shift. But it's not over. Because Harry's next words, unrehearsed, unreleased, contain more than a confession. They contain a conflict. Because what if he doesn't walk away? What if he chooses to raise the child anyway? What if love, in the face of betrayal, is the only thing that keeps him human? And what if this story is only just beginning? The whisper that started it all, a royal rumor resurfaces. They say every lie begins with silence. But what if the truth does too? What if the quietest whispers turn out to be the most dangerous? It started small. A glance between 2 staff members. A quickly hushed conversation in the shadowed corridor of Clarence's house. A phone call that ended as soon as the door creaked open. No one noticed at first. But you know how it works in royal circles. Whispers travel faster than royal horses. And someone, somewhere, always leaks. So when the story first broke, it didn't hit the headlines. It slid under the radar. A single post in an obscure European blog. Private royal insider suggests paternity doubts plague Sussex household. No photos. No sources. No follow-up. It should have died right there. But it didn't. Because inside the palace, something was happening. Something strange. Something no one wanted to admit out loud. And it all came down to one uncomfortable question. Was one of the Sussex children not really Harry's? Think about that for a second. A royal child, born into privilege, into expectation, into the line of succession, even if distant now. And yet, behind closed doors, there were doubts. Why? Let's dig in. Because the story goes back further than anyone realized. It goes back to the birth of Lilibet Diana. Now, from the outside, everything seemed perfect. The name was sentimental. The photographs were tasteful. The Sussex brand, already fraying, received a brief boost. But among royal aides, there was confusion. Meghan had reportedly told staff that she was due later in the summer. June came too soon. The timeline was off. There were whispers that the hospital staff had been minimal, that the birth certificate had anomalies, that the attending physician's signature matched one used in a completely different country. Conspiracies? Possibly. But here's the thing. Royal records are supposed to be airtight. Every child, every title, every lineage is tracked meticulously. The system relies on it. The monarchy demands it. So when tiny cracks began to show, they didn't go unnoticed. At first, the staff dismissed it. A clerical error, perhaps, or just Meghan's tendency to be overly secretive. But then something else happened. An anonymous tip, allegedly from within MI6, landed on a private email server used by the palace's legal department. The message was short, chillingly simple. There's a problem with one of the children. DNA won't match. Confidential source available. Proceed with caution. It was signed only with a letter E. Who was E? To this day, no one knows. But the message got flagged, escalated, silently forwarded to King Charles himself. And that's when things got serious. Charles, by nature, is not impulsive. He is methodical, strategic, bound by protocol and image. So he didn't call Harry. He didn't confront Meghan. He didn't even alert William. Instead, he contacted one man, Sir Martin Wickham, his most trusted liaison with the security service. A man who had handled everything from Russian spies to tabloid leaks. Find out everything, Charles reportedly told him, quietly. And so began a private investigation. One that would remain hidden for over a year. One that would eventually reveal far more than just bloodlines. Because it wasn't just about paternity. It was about manipulation, fabrication, control, and power. Back in Montecito, Harry remained oblivious. Or did he? Some sources say he knew something was wrong long before the envelope arrived. Not because someone told him, not because of any reports, but because of how he felt. Have you ever looked at someone you love and felt a sense of distance you couldn't explain? That aching disconnect? That tiny, horrible voice in your head whispering, "This doesn't feel right." That's what haunted Harry. He couldn't say it, couldn't admit it, not even to himself. But it was there. Every time he looked into her eyes. She smiled like Meghan. She giggled like Diana. But something was missing. And that void grew wider every day. Now here's where things turn. Because the investigation wasn't the only thing happening behind the scenes. Around the same time, royal staff noticed that Meghan had grown increasingly protective. Not just motherly, territorial. She limited who could be around the children. She pulled out of public appearances last minute. She allegedly canceled a major photo shoot that had already been paid for, claiming the children weren't feeling well, only for the family to be spotted out at a private beach estate the next day. It didn't add up. And when things don't add up in the royal sphere, people start subtracting trust. That's exactly what happened. Now, let's go deeper. Because you might be asking, why didn't Harry just say something sooner? Why hide this? Why live in uncertainty? And the answer is devastatingly simple. Love. Say what you will about Meghan Markle. But Harry loves her. Fiercely, blindly, desperately. And to admit the possibility that she might have lied to him, misled him, or even betrayed him, it would shatter him. So instead, he waited. He hoped. He made excuses. He told himself it was just his mind playing tricks. Just stress. Just trauma. Until it wasn't. Until the envelope arrived. And even then, even with the truth in his hands, he waited again. But let's go back to the whisper. Because long before Harry found out, the palace already knew. Charles had already seen the reports. The medical inconsistencies. The travel overlaps. The mysterious donor files allegedly linked to a private clinic in Argentina. And still, he said nothing. Why? Some say it was to protect the crown. Others say it was to protect Harry's heart. But whatever the reason, the silence became deafening. And when silence festers long enough, it becomes betrayal. There's another player in this story. Someone the press hasn't focused on. Princess Anne. Yes, the stoic, private, blunt sister to the king. According to leaked staff diaries, and confronted Charles directly. "If you don't tell him, I will," she reportedly said. "This will come out. Better it come from you than from a stranger." Charles didn't respond. He simply poured himself a scotch. And so the secret held. Until it didn't. The whisper that started it all had become a roar. But Harry? He was still in the dark. Still searching his child's face for answers he didn't want. Still trusting a truth that had already betrayed him. But that was about to change. Because something was coming. Something unexpected. A single moment. An accidental mistake. A notification on a locked phone. And everything Harry thought he knew was about to collapse.